I'm Julian Gold. I manage the Hendred Estate here in South Oxfordshire. We're about 750 hectares, mainly combinable crops and sheep flock. We're on silty clay loams over chalk. It's quite big fields, quite easy to work. I suppose the light bulb moment came when I got a beehive about 12, 15 years ago. I started thinking about insecticides and sort of ecosystems that we're working in. One of the big negatives obviously is nitrogen use. It's very carbon intensive in its manufacture and it's a cause of environmental pollution in the system. We're really quite focused in on nitrogen use efficiency. We've got a nice rotation with legumes in the system. We use nitrogen little and often. We use nitrogen in compounds, so it costs me a bit more, but I feel it's used more efficiently because with the more nitrogen we put into crops, we get this lush growth which needs more fungicides, more growth regulators, potentially more insecticides. So if we can actually bring our nitrogen use down, we can sort of slow the hamster wheel. I've got a long-term trial that's going to run around a rotation. We've got a 15-hectare block. We're doing a more biological approach. The seed's going on with no seed dressings, very low fungicide use, but trying to promote healthy plants by using trace element nutrition and biological stimulants. So the profitability was similar. I think in the first year, the trial plot had about 160 kilos a hectare of nitrogen and my field area had about 210. So that's the sort of differences. We haven't got rotational lays and we don't import a lot of organic manures. So how do I maintain a carbon positive system? The key thing is photosynthesis. So take that carbon out of the atmosphere, get it into plants and get it below ground in root exudates and big root systems and big plants. So with the controlled traffic and the scratch till and the direct drilling, we're not disturbing those root systems and we're not reoxidising the carbon that's in the soil. We're not sort of destroying fungal networks, we're not destroying earthworm holes and things. So we're sort of trying to leave the soil system as untouched as we can. There's a potential for a lot of slug damage, which we have seen historically. We do use slug pellets, we use ferric phosphate, but we find that we can do multiple rollings, works quite effectively to try and get the system really firm. We have in-field strips in some of our fields, wildflower strips, and the field with the strips down the middle of the field suffered virtually no slug damage. And that's a field, interestingly, that CEH scientists are assessing, and they monitored higher carabid beetle levels in that field. We hope that it'll help us with other pest problems as well, black bean aphid, pea and bean weevil, all the insect pests of oilseed rapes I tend to walk away from and not spray. You know, I'm in a benchmarking group with at least a dozen other farmers and our yields are just as good as theirs, if not better. Historically, a lot of farmers have put wildflower strips and habitats around the edge of fields, but it's asking a lot to get beneficials into the middle of a big field. We stop them 30 metres from the field edge, and they're all parallel to our working, so they're not really detrimental to the working of big fields at all. Where we've got pylons and rows of telegraph poles, we've got beetle banks or wildflower strips, we're making the field working easier in a lot of respects. So we're thinking about feeding bees and other pollinators. I've got a herbal lay in countryside stewardship, so we tend to get the oilseed rape flowering and then we get a hungry gap in June and the herbal lay fills that hungry gap nicely. We're planting native hedges down the middle of some AB8 wildflower strips. Cover crops last year were flowering right into mid-November, so we pretty well had flowers from early March right through to November. Before we had a 340 horsepower tractor that was doing about 850, 900 hours a year. Well, that big tractor's now come down to a 290 horsepower tractor and it's only doing about 350, 400 hours a year. Obviously our carbon footprint's lower and we're just doing much less tillage, much less field work. Without a lot of monitoring, it's quite difficult to get a handle on how long it takes to see the benefits, but there are things that you can see. The owl numbers seem to be going up. We've got a flock of starlings, which we haven't really had for years. We've got corn buntings where we've got a good habitat. So yeah, we are noticing changes. But I think it was actually, if I look back, I think the industrial ag system is too oversimplified. They're single solutions to individual problems, whereas this sort of IPM approach, it's much more interesting from a management point of view. You're thinking about lots more interacting decisions all going on at once, and it's much more satisfying ultimately. I view our natural ecosystems as our factory premises, and if they don't maintain the factory premises, ultimately the production line will fail. As we're losing more and more pesticides and inputs anyway, because either things are getting resistant to them or they're getting revoked by legislation and things, it's integrating the whole system. So, we're not so reliant on all the chemical inputs and the nitrogen fertiliser. With IPM, we're moving the slider down towards organic agriculture and utilising the principles of organic agriculture. We're retaining the inputs as useful tools, but not over-relying on them. We have to look to the long term, not for short-term profitability in agriculture, because wheat rate rotations over the last decade or so, very profitable in the short term, and that's driven resistant blackgrass, it's driven cabbage stem flea beetle, it's driven the need for massive inputs. But now I'm providing the owners with enough profit, but I'm also putting something in the natural capital deposit bank account. So it's more about long-term sustainability and long-term robust profitability rather than short-term profitability. When we have to then rely on the natural capital to help drive our food production line, I'm in a system, it's all sitting there in the deposit bank account ready.